He said it quietly, like it was something ordinary. My husband said, "I met someone else and I need space." The words floated across our kitchen table and settled between us like a crack spreading through glass. The kettle was still whistling behind me, steam curling into the air, but neither of us moved to turn it off. For a moment, I studied his face, familiar features suddenly belonging to someone I didn't recognize. There was no guilt there. Just impatience. As if I were an obstacle delaying the life he had already chosen. I folded my hands together so he wouldn't see them shaking. "I hope she brings you the peace you're looking for," I replied. He blinked, clearly expecting tears. Maybe shouting. Maybe begging. Instead, I stood up, turned off the stove, and poured the boiling water into 2 cups out of habit. That night, he packed a bag for space. What he didn't realize was that my silence wasn't surrender. It was the beginning of an ending he would never see coming. For 10 years, I had built a life with a man who believed silence meant weakness. His name was Daniel, and for most of our marriage, I was the dependable one, the steady background character in his louder story. I worked part-time, managed our home, remembered birthdays, smoothed arguments with his family, and quietly put my own ambitions on hold while he chased promotions and praise. He liked to say I was calm and easy. What he really meant was predictable. When we first married, I had been halfway through my degree. Daniel convinced me to pause it, just for a while, so we could focus on moving for his job. A year turned into 3, then 5. Eventually, my textbooks gathered dust in the closet while I handled everything that kept our life running. Friends praised him for his success. They rarely noticed the scaffolding holding it up. Over time, I learned something important about Daniel. He mistook patience for dependence. Because I didn't argue loudly, he assumed I wouldn't leave. Because I forgave small disappointments, he believed I would forgive anything. Even betrayal. When he told me he had met someone else, he expected a storm, tears, pleading, chaos. Instead, he got quiet understanding. What he didn't understand was that quiet people aren't powerless. We're simply very good at planning while everyone else is talking. In the weeks before he finally admitted the truth, the change in Daniel had been subtle, quiet enough that someone less attentive might have missed it. But I noticed everything. He started guarding his phone like it held state secrets, turning the screen away whenever a message lit up. Late-night work calls became routine. Sometimes he would smile at something on his screen, a soft private smile I hadn't seen directed at me in years. One evening, while we ate dinner across from each other, his phone buzzed again. He glanced down and that smile appeared. "Work?" I asked. "Yeah," he replied too quickly, setting the phone face down. Then he changed the subject, asking about something trivial, the electricity bill, I think. As if the glow of someone else's attention hadn't just lit up his entire face. Another night, he looked around our living room and sighed. "This place feels small lately," he said. It wasn't the apartment he meant. Sometimes he would watch me studying quietly at the kitchen table, textbooks open again after years of neglect. "You're really going back to school now?" he asked once, amused. "Is it worth the effort?" His tone wasn't cruel. Just dismissive. Like someone observing a hobby that wouldn't last. The moment everything changed wasn't dramatic. It was quiet, almost ordinary. 2 weeks after Daniel asked for space, I stopped by the apartment in the afternoon to collect a few things. He wasn't supposed to be home. I had timed it carefully between his work hours. But when I opened the door, I heard laughter. A woman's laughter. It drifted down the hallway from the living room, light and comfortable like she already belonged there. I paused in the doorway, my hands still on the knob. Then I heard Daniel's voice. "You'll love it here," he said casually. "She's probably moving out soon anyway." For a second, the words hung in the air, heavy and unmistakable. She's probably moving out soon anyway. Not my wife. Not our place. Just a temporary inconvenience he expected to disappear quietly. I stepped back outside before they could see me. Standing in the hallway, I realized something that settled deep in my chest with surprising calm. Daniel hadn't simply replaced me. He had already erased me. But instead of anger, I felt clarity. Because if I had become that easy for him to discard, then walking away wouldn't be a loss. It would be freedom. That evening, I sat at my small desk with a notebook, a pen, and the kind of clarity that only arrives when something finally breaks for good. Daniel believed I would drift away quietly. In a way, he was right. But before I disappeared from his life, I made sure my own future was secure. The first call I made was to the university registrar. My degree had only 2 semesters left, and the advisor confirmed what I suspected. I could transfer my credits to a campus in another city. The program was competitive, but my grades had always been strong. Apparently, patience also looks a lot like discipline on a transcript. The second step was practical. I opened a new bank account in my name alone and moved the money from the small freelance projects I'd been quietly doing over the past year. It wasn't much, but it was enough to start over. Daniel had never paid much attention to that work. Another small thing he had underestimated. Then I packed carefully only what belonged to me. Clothes, books, my laptop, the notebooks filled with assignments and plans. I left everything else exactly where it was, including the life he thought I was still waiting to keep. The morning I left, the apartment was silent. Sunlight slipped through the blinds, stretching across the living room floor where our couch still sat exactly where we had chosen it years earlier. I stood there for a moment, taking in the ordinary details. The faint hum of the refrigerator, the distant traffic outside, the life that once felt permanent. Then I picked up my suitcase and walked out. I didn't leave a letter. Daniel always preferred short messages anyway. By the time he came home that evening, I was already 3 hours down the highway, the city shrinking behind me in the rearview mirror. My phone buzzed once while I stopped for gas. His name flashed across the screen. "Where are you?" I didn't answer. An hour later, another message appeared. "Did you move your stuff?" Still, I said nothing. That night, in my small new apartment in a different city, I set my books on the desk by the window. Outside, unfamiliar streets glowed under soft streetlights, full of possibilities Daniel had never imagined for me. My phone buzzed again. This time the message was longer. "We need to talk." I placed the phone face down and opened my textbook. For the first time in years, my silence finally belonged to me. At first, the silence confused him. Daniel called 3 times the next morning. Then came the messages, short at first, then longer, then strangely polite. "Where did you go? Can we talk about this?" I didn't answer. Eventually, the calls stopped. That's when the messages from other people began. His sister texted me one afternoon. "Daniel said you just left without saying anything. Is everything okay?" I stared at the screen for a moment before replying with the simplest truth. "Yes. I'm fine." Word travels quickly when someone expected to stay suddenly disappears. Friends who hadn't checked in for months started asking questions. Some sounded concerned. Others sounded curious. But the story Daniel told them, that I had simply walked away, never quite landed the way he expected. Because people notice patterns. They remembered the late nights he used to brag about. The new woman who had started appearing in photos too quickly. The way I had quietly returned to school long before the marriage officially unraveled. Little details formed their own narrative. And slowly something shifted. Not in his reputation alone, but in mine. People stopped seeing me as the quiet wife who stayed. They began seeing the woman who chose herself instead. And that difference matters more than anyone realizes. Months passed, and the life I once thought I had lost slowly reshaped itself into something stronger. My days became simple in the best way. Mornings started with coffee by the window of my small apartment, textbooks spread across the desk, sunlight warming the pages. Afternoons were filled with lectures, assignments, and the quiet satisfaction of finishing something I had once abandoned. For the first time in years, my future belonged entirely to me. Daniel tried reaching out again a few months later. A single message appeared late one evening. "I didn't think you'd actually leave." I read it once, then closed the notification without replying. That sentence told me everything. He never believed I had the courage to choose a life beyond him. He thought my patience meant permanence. He mistook my quiet nature for loyalty that would never break. But silence can be powerful in ways people rarely understand. It creates space. It reveals truth. It lets consequences arrive without interference. By the time I finished my degree the following year, Daniel had become nothing more than a chapter one no longer reread. Not because I forgot what happened, but because I finally understood something important. The strongest revenge isn't making someone regret losing you. It's building a life so full that you never look back.